Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Newark Museum of Art. Tonight is a special night for parents. We're going to be talking to you about how to deal with distant learning, this virtual learning during this time of COVID. We know it's tough. We know you need a break. It's been a long time since you have not seen a computer screen, and we're here to help you make this process a little bit easier for you and your little ones. To kind of de-stress them at this time. We have with us this evening Jax Lake, who is a friend of the museum. She is a parent-child advocate. She's been active in our community for a long time. She has some wonderful information to share with you on this evening. We also have some fun activities that you'll be able to do with your children together in home, kind of to break down the long day of stressing. Please feel free to add questions into the chat, into the question and answering, and we'll get to them during the program. And I'm going to turn this over to Jackie right now, and she can tell you a little bit more about herself and what she's going to be doing with you on this evening. Thank you again for joining us, and stay tuned. It's going to be good.
Good evening, everyone. How are you today? I can't hear you, but I'm sure you are wonderful. Or maybe some of you might feel a little stressed out, a little fatigued, a little tired of the Zooms, tired of all the calls, and tired of the homeschooling and virtual learning and working from home and all that kind of stuff. But I'm going to teach you some really great skills to try to get through that the best way you can. You guys ready?
We're ready.
Let's go. So I would like to preface by saying thank you so much, Ms. Shirley, and thank you so much to the Newark Museum for all of the amazing work that you're doing. And families, if you've missed out, there's so many amazing programs that the museum offers that you really should take advantage of that can help you to de-stress along this journey. You guys need a break, your children need a break. So all the offerings at the museum is exactly what you need. So let's start out by taking a deep breath. Alrighty, so we're gonna inhale, try to hold it for 5 seconds, and then you're going to exhale slowly. Ready? Here we go. One more time. Sometimes we just have to get our minds reset and refocused, and practice and concentrate on our breathing and do a little mindfulness from time to time throughout the day. So if you can, grab a pen and paper. If you don't have one, take a quick second and grab that. And if you do, we're about to get ready to roll. So today we're going to be talking about best practices for successful digital educational experiences. We'll talk about time management, digital platforms 101, ways to deal with stress, and also digital fatigue, which many of us are dealing with right now in the height of the pandemic. So how many of you have come to the conclusion that the old normal was not actually very normal at all, right? We thought the old normal was kind of normal at the time, but now we kind of realize it really wasn't that normal, and we're still not really back to normal now. We find ourselves talking about the new normal, but we haven't even grasped a fraction of what the new normal means. Dynamics are changing every day. They're changing minute by minute. You turn on the news and 1 minute, this is what the outcomes are. The next minute, this is what the outcomes are, right? So we're receiving a lot of input, we're processing it, we're putting it back out, but it changes day by day, second by second, minute by minute. And one of the stress relieving techniques is, if this becomes too much for you, it's okay to just unplug, shut your televisions off, stop scrolling through Facebook, stop scrolling through Instagram, Twitter, online reading some of the articles, because that will indeed create more stress. Now, can you believe that we're already in the second wave of the pandemic? Who would have ever thought we would actually already be in the second wave of the pandemic? The time is flying by. We've lost so many people, and it's so unfortunate. So my prayers of condolences and well wishes go out to any families that unfortunately lost someone in the pandemic, or any of the long haulers who are struggling through this process. I just really hope that you recover soon and you're able to, manage your emotions and your family, and maybe you can do things that you weren't able to do before. Maybe you can't do things that you used to be able to do. In the meantime, can you guys really believe that we still have about 120 more days left of school? Kind of scary to think about it, but we still have, some more time. So we have more days ahead of us with this whole virtual learning process than we do behind us. So we have to buckle down and get rolling and keep on going. So sorry for the reality check, guys, about 120 days left of school. If you're booing me, I can't hear you because we're on Zoom right now. It's a webinar. So it's okay. I can handle the boos. Bring them my way. Now, this is a stressful time for parents and caregivers, even for the children. Sometimes parents forget that children are like little people and they have emotions and they have feelings as well. And they have stressors too. So we really have to dial it back a little bit and kind of just pause. And when we're in the height of our angst and anxiety and frustration, we have to realize that, wait a minute, maybe my child is at the height of their angst and frustration as well. So maybe they're beginning to act out, they're misbehaving in some ways, maybe they're overeating or maybe they're undereating, and they just might have some other things that are going on, and it could all be due to stress. And guess what? Our children watch every single thing we do. So sometimes the stress that we project, we're projecting it onto our children, and then they perceive that and receive it. And now before you know it, they're acting and reacting in similar ways. So now there are two different types of stress. Are you guys familiar with them, or you just know one type of stress? Well, if you didn't, I'm going to tell you two. So we have eustress, and then we have de-stress. Okay, so eustress is EUSTRESS. So eustress is like when you're getting dressed and ready to walk down the aisle, right? You guys remember that day if you're married and you walk down the aisle and you were all excited, and you look down and the man or woman of your dreams is at the other end waiting for you and you're all excited. That's a sign of eustress, right? Because there's something positive happening in the end that you're excited about going on. Now, you might have felt a little overwhelmed, but you were still so excited. Another type of eustress could be getting accepted to the college of your choice, right? Or maybe getting that job you wanted, or exactly like euphoria. Someone says euphoria. Absolutely. It's that positive, enlightening type of stress, right? Or you're getting the job you wanted, or you're about to start the business that you always wanted to start, and you finally have taken the time to say, I'm going to go for it, right? Now, on the other hand, there is distress. Distress might be when you were walking down the aisle and you look at the end, you're like, oh my God, I so should have said no. Maybe this is not a good choice, right? That's kind of distress. Distress could also be for your children. They might say, oh no, I didn't fill out that application on time, or I didn't fill out the financial aid, package when I should have. Or there's so many different examples of distress. We all kind of know, what distress is. Or even on our job, if we didn't meet the deadline when we should have, and now we know what the backlash could be. And especially in the height of COVID, before we were dispensable, on our jobs, if you dropped dead of a stroke, guess what? Your desk or your cubicle, your office will be filled up within a week, if that, with someone else potentially. Right? So we have to really think about that and put it all into perspective, and just try to stay on task and on point, and make sure we do what we need to do in the right manner so that we can try to hold on to what we have, right? So when you miss those deadlines or you drop the ball, you automatically feel a sense of distress, right? So that's why it's really important for us to think about a term called reflection in action. Now, reflection in action is when we kind of think about the outcomes in the midst of what we're going through. So if we're in the middle of doing something and we're kind of like, you know what, maybe this is not a great idea, or maybe if I do this, this will be the end result. We have to know that, whoa, pump the brakes. I need to stop because I already see the outcome, right? So that's kind of exercising some wisdom and discernment, right? So that's what reflection and action is about. Now, in this ever-changing world, we all feel some level of stress, right? We all experience some level of anxiety and anxiousness. And it's okay to feel anxiety, and it's okay to be anxious. But we just have to make sure that we don't remain in that state of anxiety or anxiousness, right? It's all right to have that fleeting moment and just know that it's going to pass. Eventually it will truly, truly pass. And we're not going to just drop dead right at that moment, from having, an anxiety attack or a panic attack, although it may feel like it. So give yourself some time, cut yourself a break, and just know that this too shall pass, right? So how many of you have noticed that your children have been experiencing some anxiety and stress? Yeah, I'm sure a lot of us have noticed that. We might say to our children sometimes that we really understand how you feel. I get it, mom gets it, dad gets it. but really we don't get it, right? We did not live through what they're living through right now. They're not able to spend time with their friends like they used to. Thankfully, they have social media. Imagine if it were a time like when we were growing up, where there was no social media, there's no video call like the Jetsons, right? Where we can, chat with our friends. So at least timing worked out where now the children can actually communicate in different ways with their friends and with their family, right? So things are just, quite different. So we don't fully understand exactly what our children are going through, although we can still have some empathy and compassion with that, but we don't fully understand. So we have to cut them some slack. So anxiety, when we think about it, it can actually be mild to intense, right? So it's essentially the result of a big stressor or a series of smaller stressors, right? You guys get it? So there are several different types. So when we think about general anxiety, that's kind of like a panic disorder, right? Well, we also have panic disorders. That's the second one. So the first one with general anxiety, it's when you feel worried for what appears to be little or no reason, right? You just feel a little worried. You're a little, anxious. You don't really know why, but you're kind of like freaking out maybe a little bit. So that's just general anxiety. And then when you take it a step further, you have panic disorder. So now anybody ever have a panic disorder? I know my husband has them sometimes. He has a thyroid problem and sometimes he has panic disorders, issues. And I know one time he was on the highway and he calls me, he's like, I'm driving the truck for work and I'm, like 1,000 miles away from civilization. And he was in the truck, like freaking out. He's like, the ambulance, they're on their way, So I'm like, John, just relax. Like, you're going to be fine. But in that moment, he didn't think he was going to be fine at all. So a panic disorder comes on suddenly and brings about intense fear, right? You can start to feel sweaty, increased heartbeat, your head might start to pound, your palms, can, get sweaty as well. So that's part of a panic disorder. Now, there's also something called social anxiety. I know sometimes children experience that, but adults can also experience some social anxiety also. Some may feel that they're socially awkward. Now, social anxiety is when you fear social settings or you feel self-conscious or embarrassed, which is still normal, sometimes. So that's why it's still critical that we try to build our self-esteem, right? That we learn to believe in ourselves and not fear the unknown and not fear, oh my God, what's he going to think about me? Or what is she going to think about me? Or, what will they think about my dress or my shirt or my hair or my, my pocketbook or my car? Or there's so many different things that people are worried about that really should not concern them, right? So we have to learn how to move on. Now, there's also something called separation anxiety, and some children actually suffer from separation anxiety. Now, if you think about helicopter parents, right? What they call helicopter parents, sometimes they even suffer from separation anxiety. Like their kid goes somewhere for the weekend or for the afternoon, or maybe even for an hour. And next thing you know, the parent is like freaking out, right? But it's okay. We cannot control everything. Sometimes as parents, we just got to let go. You parents hear me? Sometimes we have just got to let go. Our children are more resilient than you could ever imagine. And many times we just, think that they're not going to be able to do it, or what will they do without me? But if you really did what you were supposed to do as a parent and really instilled in them greatness, which I'm sure you all have done, be okay with that. Be okay and know that your child is going to be okay. Are they going to fall down? Are they going to make some mistakes and poor decisions sometimes? Absolutely. We all did. I know some of the decisions I made growing up were not the greatest decisions to make at all, right? But you know what? Thankfully, I lived and survived and got through it. And maybe along the way, I got a few spankings. I always laugh and say my mom should just be getting off of parole right now for all the spankings that I got. But she's my best friend now, and she did what she did, what in the way that she thought was best, for the better. So as parents, we have to realize that we can't always just be, helicopter parents and just, encompassing our children so much that they can't get a chance to breathe. Because what will happen? Eventually, they're going to resent us, and eventually they will they want to push away from us. And they really don't want to spend as much time with us as we would like for them to be, right? Because we have to remember, our children are older for more than they are younger, right? So we just have to really be aware of that. Now, some children also may exhibit selective mutism, right? Selective mutism. Selective mutism is where some children speak normally around their friends and family, but when they get in public, they're not able to speak. They really cannot pull it together. My children run track, and I know one of the kids on the track team, he actually is a teenager and he suffers from that. So he speaks with his parents and everywhere, but when he gets around the team, sometimes he won't really speak too much, you know? So it happens sometimes and it's real. Now we also have medication-induced anxiety, right? Medication-induced anxiety. Some medications bring forth anxiety, right? So now certain drugs, like you can also have withdrawals. Some people are on medication or are weaning themselves off of potent substances, and they can experience withdrawals. And guess what? That too can cause anxiety and stress and panic and all the other above things that I mentioned. And also anxiety can even lead to the D word. You guys know what the D word is? Let me guess, anybody know? The D word, I call it, is depression. That's a word? Absolutely, someone just said it, absolutely, depression. So I'm not a big fan of the D word, right? I know some things, I know there is still clinical depression, but I know sometimes people use the word so freely, right? Oh, I'm depressed, I didn't get this, opportunity, or I'm depressed because the ice cream didn't taste like I thought it was gonna be, right? But depression is serious, very serious. And we have to make sure that we treat it as such. And we have to be careful when we use certain words, because we can then become that which what we say, right? So in essence, anxiety is what I call a result of over processing, right? The result of over processing. What happens when we over process our hair, right? When we over process our hair, eventually we might perm it, we might dye it. Back in the day, in the 80s, we might have jerry curled it or did all kind of crazy things to our hair, So eventually after over processing our hair, what happens? It gets limp, it falls out, right? So we have to be careful with that. So the same thing with anxiety in our life, we can just fall apart. I'll give you guys a quick story. A couple of months ago, like I have a short haircut, as you can see, right? So I'm like letting, my hair grow back. And I said, you know what, I'm gonna go and get braids. One Saturday morning, I woke up and I'm like, you know what, I'm gonna try something different. I never had braids, like one time in like the 90s or whatever. So I said, I'm gonna go and get braids. And so I went to the salon early on a Saturday morning and I said, I'll treat myself, away from the kids, away from the house, away from the husband, just treat myself. So I got braids. I thought I had black girl magic, but when the girls put these braids in my hair, it was so tight. There were like these 5 beautiful ladies braiding my hair from all different angles. And it was so, so painful, let me tell you, right? So painful. So I was always what they call tender-headed when I was a kid, but I thought I'm a woman now, like I can handle it. I couldn't handle it too well. The braids stayed in my hair for about 4 days, right? 4 days. I've spent hundreds of dollars for braids to last 4 days. Mind you, they can usually last like maybe a couple of months or, at least a month, but mine were 4 days. So what scared me was one day I was I was getting like headaches and I was, for some reason I was like twitching and like I kept getting the chills. I'm like, what the heck? I am not gonna die from getting my hair braided. My brother would roast me if I died from just getting my hair braided. I'm the little sister, so he still treats me as such. So I looked at my scalp one day and I saw like a little red, looked like a blood vessel or something was rupturing. And I'm like, OMG, like, I'm not gonna die from braids. So my husband's like, take the braids out. So my kids and my husband, we all sat around the living room. Everyone had a pair of scissors and everyone was just like cutting like every braid out. So it was the worst. But some girls, they'll keep them in forever. But I thought I had that black girl magic, but not that kind of black girl magic. It didn't quite work out for me. So I had to move on. So eventually from stress and over processing, it will make our hair weak, damaged, fall out. So what happens when we live in a perpetual state of anxiety, fear, and depression? What happens? Our minds and bodies become over processed is actually what happens. Our spirit becomes fragile. Our faith may even seem to exist, right? We weren't meant to hold our heads down, guys. We weren't meant to hold our heads down and woe is me and just be depressed and just be in a downtrodden state of mind. We weren't designed to be like that, right? If we were, our vertebrae would have stopped halfway up our back. right? But instead, we could have had maybe 15 vertebrae, but instead, guess how many we have? We have 33 vertebrae, right? They're interlocking bones that form our spinal column. So our spine extends from, the base of our neck, through to our skull and, down our back. And when we think about it, that spinal column is what helps us to hold our heads up, right? So we need to hold our heads high, guys. Hold your head high, throw your shoulders back, and just be positive and feel your power, right? Relax your shoulders, keep your ears over top of your shoulders like a lollipop, and just walk in your power and just walk in your purpose, and know that you are fearfully and wonderfully made. Because we can't live in a state of depression and say all of that because this impacts how our children learn, because it impacts how we learn and how we teach and how we manage our children. Now, I wrote a children's book. It's entitled I Am Bigger and So Are You. I'll show you if you guys haven't heard about it. It's an awesome book. See? It's called I Am Bigger and So Are You. It's actually available on Amazon, as well as at the Source of Knowledge bookstore in Newark, downtown Newark on Broad Street. And they're actually back open, so that's a beautiful thing. So in the book, there's a line that says, crying can cleanse your soul and help you refocus to achieve your goal, right? I'll say it again. Crying can cleanse your soul and help you refocus to achieve your goal. Now that line, I did a celebrity read one day with the United Way, and I read to a third grader. Now this third grader, after I read that line, he comes up to me, grabbing me and holding me. Miss Lake, my mommy always told me I'm not allowed to cry. I'm like, really? You're not allowed to cry? He says, no, my mom said crying is a sin and I'm not allowed to cry. When this little boy said that to me, it broke my heart. It really, really did. It broke my heart. Now, the mom could have been saying that simply in jest. She could have been saying it, would you stop crying? Crying is a sin, just to finally get him to calm down. I don't know the backstory, or she could have been serious and said to him, you are not allowed to cry. You're a boy. You're going to be a man. You're not allowed to cry. It's a sin. Maybe that's how she said it. I don't know. But no matter how she said it, it's about how the little boy perceived it. And he perceived it that if he cried, he was going against God, right? So that's kind of a hard pill to swallow. And I'm sure the mom, I don't even know who the mom is, but I'm sure if she knew that's how her son felt and shared that publicly, she probably would be quite embarrassed. So we have to really think about it. Because if God didn't want us to have tear ducts, he would have patched them up, right? Because in the corners of our eyes, we have tear ducts. And our tear ducts release our tears. And did you know that genetically, our tear ducts have different chemical compositions if we're sad, tears of joy, or sorrow, right? It makes a difference. We're all genetically put together so wonderfully. So we really have to think about that, how we talk to our children and what we say, because although we may be saying something in jest, they can always take it another way, a way that we didn't mean, and a way that they can carry that with them for the rest of their lives. It can impact them forever. And I know we love our children. And as much as they kind of drive us crazy sometimes, we want to keep them focused. We want to keep them on the up and up, right? Now, through this pandemic, the journey of virtual learning, we must stay focused. If not, guess what? We're going to crumble. If we're not focused, we're simply going to crumble. And guess who else will crumble? Our children, right? Our children will crumble. We have to be adaptable. We can't be so rigid in our thinking and so antiquated in our systems and think that our way is the right way and our way is the only way. We have to take 2 fish and 5 loaves and make it do what it do, right? We have to know that we must remain, focused and flexible. I remember back in the day, my mom, she was always saying like kids are flitting around. I had this one cousin and he was always jumping around and flipping around everywhere. And it would drive my mom crazy, right? But if you think about it, kids are always busy moving and talking and jumping around. But guess what? They're kids. That's what they're supposed to do. That's what they were designed to do. That's what we did. Even if we were kind of shut down, I know some of us had really tough parents probably, and we were kind of shut down and not able to express ourselves. And some of our parents, as we've grown up, sometimes as adults now, it's hard for us to express ourselves because we think maybe we're not allowed to. Maybe we're still in that shell, right? Think of all the issues that you might have and say to yourself, do I want my kids to have some of these same issues to have to overcome in their future? Or do I want to give my kid a little bit more balance? Not to say we had bad parenting, right? But back in the day, did our parents have platforms like this to learn and engage and receive so many resources? Not at all. Our parents had none of this. So we're so fortunate to have these amazing resources, especially through the Newark Museum. They have resources from A to Z. I mean, you can go there and see fine art. You can go there and see clothing and, from other countries and cultures. You can develop life skills. The Explorers program shows children, about college, and they help with college essays and opportunities. I mean, from A to Z, soup to nuts, summer camp for the kids. I mean, they have so much there, right? Our parents didn't have that. Our parents didn't have those resources. So their stress was super duper stress, far more than sometimes what our stresses are, right? So we have to know that even back in the day when our parents would say, if you don't sit your down, right? You know what? We still have to be respectful and listen to our parents. But sometimes we need to allow our kids to get up and move and explore. Because guess what? You can learn a lot from your children by watching them when they're flitting around. What are they thinking about? What are they imagining? What are they creating? What are they doing? There's so many things that our children can do while they're flitting around that maybe they're going to be the next scientist, right? Maybe they're going to be the next inventor. Maybe they'll be the next one to create their own brand. Maybe it's not going to be called Nike or Adidas, but it will be called whatever they want it to be called, whatever is on their heart. Maybe they're always singing, making up songs or dances or words. Maybe they'll be on Broadway one day, right? They can be whatever they work hard to be, but they need us to support them through this, and especially through this time of remote learning, right? And when we think about anxiety through this whole process, it's simply like running out of a burning house that's not actually even burning. We put so much stock into what we perceive, what we think is going on, what we think will happen, what might not happen, so many different variables, right? So we're worrying about a house that's not even burning down, but we think that it actually is burning down. So when you think about it, it sounds kind of cuckoo, right? Absolutely, absolutely. So we just need to step back and breathe, right? Like we said earlier, breathe. Now, there are different tips that I have that can lead to success. Now, one of the main tips that I even talk about in my book is vision, plan, action, and success. Because in life, first we have to have a vision, guys, right? We have to have a vision. Because if you believe it, you can achieve it. So once we have that vision, then we have to create a plan. That vision is nothing without a plan to execute it. So we have to think about our circle, right? We think about our friends. If you don't have too many friends, think outside. You know what? There might be someone that a lady or man you might see when you go to Walmart all the time. That is nice and friendly, and you never know what they know and how they can help you. We have to think about our social capital. Many times we just think about our financial capital, but our social capital and the people that we know and engage and interact with is priceless. Life is all about connections. If our children are having trouble in school in certain areas, we need to make sure we use our resources. And our resources don't always have to cost us money, right? Sometimes they might need tutoring. There are so many children out there that maybe they can reach out to a college student somehow, word of mouth. So many people post all crazy stuff sometimes on social media, but say, hey, my kid needs help with this. Does anyone have a teenager, maybe a great student that can help my kid with that subject? Sometimes we just really have to think outside of the box, right? To get to where we need to go. And to go further, one of the biggest things that we need to talk about also is time management, right? Time management is so important, guys. How many of you guys believe that? How many of you guys are struggling with time management? Anybody have a tough time with time management? I know a lot of adults as well.
Jackie, there's something rubbing against your mic.
It is, okay, gotcha, thank you. I know so many people have so many issues with time management, right? Now, time management is key. So the one thing you need to make sure you do is write it down. I always tell people they have so many things stuck in their brain. And how many times are people laying there in the middle of the night and just, they can't sleep, right? Their nerves, seems like their nerves are bad and they just really can't focus. Guess what? They have a lot of stuff trapped up here. But what do you need to do? Get a notepad. Just write those things that are in your brain, put it on paper. Because when you put it on paper, it will truly help to declutter your mind. It's just like in your home. If you look at your room or your kid's room or whatever room in the house, it might be a little cluttered. And you might have to say, whoa, let me declutter this space so that I can think clearly, so that I can move on, right? Because a messy space, sometimes we hold on to too much stuff. I mean, how many of you guys have seen those shows, Tiny House? I mean, they had these tiny houses that are maybe like 300 square feet, and they left like these big, huge, fancy homes and moved into somewhere that's so small. But guess what? It's possible. We have so much stuff that we don't even need. So why not take this as a moment to maybe try to sell some of the items that you may have, or better yet, try to give it away to somebody who may be less fortunate, right? That is so important. Someone just says writing your feelings helps release. Absolutely. Absolutely. And you know what? Sometimes you might think about writing that email or sending that text back to someone. No, she didn't. You know, someone says something to you that you didn't like, or something happened that you didn't like. You could type it out in a text, but guess what? When you're done, erase it. Erase it. We don't have to say everything that we think. Okay? Many times we get caught out there saying verbally everything that is going through our minds, right? But we don't have to, because sometimes that does more damage than good. But writing your feelings down, journaling your feelings as well. Don't keep all those thoughts and tasks all, jumbled up in your brain, because you're scared you're going to forget. And guess what? Being scared you're going to forget is doing what? Causing more stress, which is exactly what the heck we're trying to get away from, right? So we have to take those little steps to say, if this is going to cause me stress, what can I do to prevent that? So we need to practice, what was it called? Reflection in action. We need to think about the outcomes and then do what we need to do to move beyond that, right? We also, during this process, need to think about flexibility, right? Flexibility. It's imperative to know that you must remain flexible, right? You must remain flexible, because if you don't bend, what's going to happen? You're bound to break. If you don't bend, guys, you're bound to break. You either want peace or you want to be in pieces. Now, for me, I prefer peace. I don't want to be broken up into pieces. So sometimes you have to go into your own quiet place. If it's not physically in your home, sometimes in your mind. Your quiet place may be like walking down the street to the bus, on your way to work, or on your way to wherever you need to go to the grocery store. And sometimes you just have to stop and say, I need some peace. Let me think about some things, right? Let me really stop and think about some things so that I can move forth and make better choices, because my choices impact who? Who do your choices impact? Your kids. Exactly. Full circle, guys, full circle. So do you want to be right, or do you okay with being wrong, right? Is it okay to be wrong? Or as parents, do we have to feel like we know everything and be right all the time, right? It's okay. We don't have to know all the answers. Our parents didn't know all the answers, and we're not going to know all the answers. We're not supposed to, right? My favorite thing that my kids hate is look it up. That's my line. Google it. Everything's there. Google it, right? Or better yet, let's Google it together, because I want to know the answer as well. It's okay to show our kids that we're vulnerable in some spaces. And many times parents feel that they have to be so big and stoic and, and righteous, right? But do you want to be right, or do you want to seek righteousness? That's what you have to decide. Are you going to be a warrior, or are you going to be a worrier? Do you want to be a worrier, guys? I don't think so. It's no fun being a worrier. Some people just live to worry. We do not want to be in that space, because once again, if we're worrying about everything, what happens? That disrupts our peace, right? That disrupts our mental health. That disrupts our ability to effectively parent. And we want to make sure that we effectively parent our children to the best we know how. So we just have to take off our cape sometimes. Just take it off. You don't get any additional brownie points for wearing that cape. Sometimes just take the cape off. Sometimes just don't be afraid to say no. We can't be people pleasers, guys. We cannot. Sometimes whenever someone says something, oh, can you do this? Oh yeah, sure I can. Oh, can you do that? Oh, sure I can. and before you know it, we have a pile this high of things that we're doing to sometimes try to help other people, which is coming from a good place. However, we have to say, where would we be if we continue to help everyone and can't even help ourselves? So we can't be afraid, guys, to say sometimes, no, I wish I could, but I really can't right now. Or just say no with no explanation. You don't have to give others an explanation if you don't want to, right? You can just say no, period, right? Say no, period. End of the story. End of the doggone story, right? Because our children feel our emotions. I know you guys have heard when you have a baby, or you're watching a young girl, possibly with a baby, and she's all nervous and freaking out. And you're like, calm down, the baby can sense, your emotions. That is so true. That is so true. Even animals can sense our emotions, right? Animals sense fear. They sense when things aren't right. We just got a new little puppy. We call it, my daughter named him Grizzly. He's a little Yorkshire Terrier. He's precious, right? He even has his own Instagram page. It's so crazy. My kids are like, he's gonna be a famous puppy, right? So it's called the Official Grizzly Lake. That's his Instagram page, right? So Grizzly is adorable. So recently, my great aunt, who's 97 years old, had to move in with us because she was having some health problems. Never married, no children, lived on her own, until one day my husband took her to the doctor and she had one shoe on, and he's like, what is going on? So ultimately she had a mini stroke, and they said, you can no longer live on your own. So we said, okay, well, she'll come and live with us. So recently she took a tumble down the stairs in the middle of the night. Thankfully she didn't break anything, but she went to the hospital, and every day that she's been gone, our little pup Grizzly is right there by her bedroom door. He walks around the house. He'll sit right by her walker and just snuggle up underneath the wheel of her walker. And I'm sure he's probably remembering, all she says to him, hey there, floppy ears. Hey there, floppy ears. But he senses it, just like our children sense it. So that's why during this whole virtual learning process, we have to really learn to try to keep peace, right? Because when we don't keep that peace, everything else will eventually fall apart. And it makes it more difficult for our children to learn. Could you imagine going to work and you're getting yelled at by your boss all the time? Or you're, getting in trouble for like nothing ever seems like it's good enough every time you submit an assignment, or every time, you stock the shelves or whatever it is that you do? Could you imagine how that would feel? So imagine how our kids feel sometimes when we put so much stress and pressure and anxiety that we have from sometimes the poor choices that we make, because guess what? We are the sum of our experiences, right? We are the sum of our experiences. So we want to make sure that our children are in better shape than we are, right? We have to set boundaries and goals for ourselves and our children. We have to understand roles, right? I've always told my children, I don't need any 80-pound friends. Many times parents get it mixed up and they think like, oh, my child's my friend, and oh, I want to do, this with my kid, and I want to dress my daughter up like that, or, I'm going to talk to my son about, whatever it is, right? And they tend to think that their children are their friends. When I tell my kids, I have some grown friends, and most of my friends are thickums, and they're more than 80 pounds, right? So I don't need any little 80-pound or 75-pound friends. My friends are adults. So in parenting, we have to make sure that we let our children know and create clear and defined boundaries. Because when you don't create those boundaries, the expectations are different. The children think they can talk in certain ways. They think they can behave in certain ways. They think they can demand certain things as a friend, that as a child, they are not in the space to be demanding certain things, right? And even if a friend is coming to you demanding something, you still have a right to say no. And same thing with your kids. You don't have to feel so guilty that you spend all your hard-earned money, or you're doing all this overtime and working 2 and 3 jobs to give your children superficial things, because that's not beneficial. That's not going to patch up a wound that they might have inside. What the children need is for you to maybe say on a Saturday, hey, let's go for a walk. Let's go to the park. Let's sit in the house and bake cookies together and just talk. Let's lay the blankets on the living room floor and have a camp night and, make, s'mores or whatever it is you want to make, right? Or just spend quality time with your children, set boundaries and have them understand that they are indeed your children and that you are indeed their parent, right? And for me, it works for me, maybe not for some others, but for me, God makes a big difference, in my life. So recently I actually created these bracelets, right? It says God period, because I know when I have stress, I could look down at my wrist and say, no matter what, for me, it works. And it helps to reduce and alleviate stress and angst and anxiety. Okay. So now we're going to shift a bit and we are going to talk about some emotional intelligence, because emotional intelligence is what helps pull all those other pieces together. Okay. That will pull it all together. Are you all familiar with emotional intelligence? Some of you, yes. Maybe some of you know. Maybe some of you have heard of IQ. IQ and EQ, right? IQ is your intelligence quotient. And that's kind of like, how you test on a standardized test and, what level you get and shows, quote unquote, how smart you are. That's your IQ. Your EQ is your emotional quotient. Now, when we think about the successes in life, we need to realize that 80% of life success is based and rooted in EQ, emotional intelligence piece, right? Only 20% is really about IQ. So we really need to make sure that we are emotionally sound and that our children too are emotionally sound, right? So emotional intelligence essentially is the capacity to be aware of, control and express your emotions, and to handle interpersonal relationships judiciously and empathetically. So we have to understand that part. You understand? Judiciously and empathetically. That is so key. So we have to be able to recognize our emotions and the emotions of who? Of others. And yes, of our children, right? We know that there's a time to speak and a time to listen. I remember always learning growing up that we have 2 ears to listen more than we speak because we have 1 mouth, and we have 2 eyes, and I have 2 big old eyes. So we have to look and pay attention more than we speak as well, right? So we always have to just try to listen and look before we speak, because we should always remember, speak without offending, listen without defending. You guys catch that one? Listen, speak without offending, and listen without defending. That is really key. So we need to learn how to balance our feelings and balance our reality, right? Balancing our reality is kind of like that burning house that I told you, that's not actually even burning. We can't be dominated by negative thoughts. We have to make sure that, some people who have a lower EQ, they're never satisfied. You guys ever meet people like that? No matter what you do, they're just never satisfied. I know I have. Some people are never satisfied. They're impatient. They're impulsive. So they really have a low EQ. So in life, we want to make sure we increase our EQ, because when we have a higher EQ, we do better on our jobs. We do better in our personal lives. Our children will do better in school. That is so, so important. So there's about 4 key competencies when we think about EQ. So we have self-emotional skills, right? Where that's rooted in self-awareness, knowledge of self, and self-management. Self-management is key. Have you ever been at work and you see somebody who's like the genius on the job, but emotionally and socially, they're kind of like awkward and kind of off and kind of, like they, aren't too self-aware, right? It's somebody like that everywhere we go. And guess what? Sometimes it might even be us. So that's something that we can, really think about and work on that EQ competency and develop it and strengthen it. We also have interpersonal development, and that's developing human potential and performance. We have something called management excellence. That's relationship managed capabilities, right? Relationship management capabilities. We have to learn how to manage the relationships that we have. If it's good for you, keep it coming. If it's not, push it away. Too many times we sit in situations that are not healthy and good for us to be in. And sometimes we have to work some things out first as you're going through it. But eventually you have to do what you got to do. Sometimes you have to love people from a distance. It could be a friend. It could be a sibling. It could be a spouse sometimes, or a boyfriend or a girlfriend, right? So sometimes we just have to learn how to let go and be okay with that. Because if it's meant for you, it's going to come back and things will work itself out. But just don't put yourself in a situation. There's so many people who are dealing with domestic violence. During the pandemic, domestic violence was through the roof. But guess what? The calls to the domestic violence hotline was what? Down. Calls were down. Why is that? Because many times people were trapped in the home with their abuser. So being trapped in the home with their abuser, they can't make that phone call. Because if they get caught making the phone call, they'll get in even more trouble by their abuser, right? That's dangerous. That's dangerous. So many people need help. So that's a whole nother workshop, that we can talk about another time about domestic violence, because it's real and it exists. And we have to do our best to get out of it if we are in it, for the sake of ourselves, but also for our children. It's like if you're in an airplane, right? You have to save yourself first. You have to put on your oxygen mask first before you go trying to rescue everyone else. Even if you're on a plane with your kid, you got to put your oxygen mask on so that then you can save your child. So in life, we have to make sure through this whole pandemic, through this whole virtual learning process, we have to make sure that we are saving ourselves so that we can save our children and teach them how to save themselves as well. Okay. Now, there's also some other factors. The fourth competency is socioeconomic factors. That includes sociability, social and economic awareness as well. We have to be aware of our finances, guys. We have to get into position and make sure that we're doing what we can do to build our credit. You can get your credit report for free online. If you have a social security number, you can get your credit report free once a year. Go for it, get that credit report, start building, start disputing things that are wrong. Because guess what? When your finances are messed up, you feel messed up. When you feel messed up, you can't give your kids what they need. So we have to make sure we look at that whole piece as well. Now with EQ, emotional quotient, can you guys say intellect over emotions? Let me hear you say it. Intellect over emotions, that's right. Say it again. Intellect over emotions. So that's I over E, intellect over emotions. So in life, guys, we need to really think about our intellect over our emotions. Many times we say, well, I feel this way and I think I should do this and I should be able to do that. But we have to once again pause, do that breath, deep breath, and say, let me use my intellect, because your intellect will help you to get to the next level along with your emotions. Okay. So use your intellect as well. So with EQ will allow you to be morally autonomous. It allows you to be self-aware, empathetic. You'll have better social skills. You'll be motivated. You'll understand how to better self-regulate. And that's what sometimes our children need to do, is practice self-regulation, right? So if I know back in the day, if I didn't practice self-regulation, my mom was coming somewhere in that belt was showing me a little self-regulation, right? Some belt regulation, but we can't do it like that, like we used to, right? Or like was done to some of us, because you'll have a whole slew of problems. So we don't want our children to have those type of issues. So we have to also make sure that we're not immobilized by fear. Fear will cripple you. Fear will stop you in your tracks. Fear will prevent you from doing some great things. You have greatness within you to impact the world. And if you're sitting somewhere in a place of fear, you will not be able to get to that next level. I promise you. You won't be able to. So you have to do something to overcome that fear. Overcome that fear and believe in yourself. And don't be afraid to express yourself and your emotions. If you try to get a great opportunity and someone says no, say, okay, thank you very much. Keep it moving, because eventually, guess what? Somebody will. Somebody will. So I'm going to tell you a few examples of low EQ versus high EQ. You ready? So low EQ. Somebody with low EQ may exhibit some of these personality traits. They may be a bit demanding, aggressive, and confrontational. Whereas someone with a higher EQ would be ambitious, assertive, and strong-willed. Now there's a difference, guys. You can be strong-willed, but not be confrontational. You can manage somebody, harnessing their ability to be strong-willed. I know as a kid, my mom always says that when I was, I believe, 2 years old, she had to go out and buy a book about the strong-willed child, because guess who was strong-willed? Me. And guess who's still strong-willed? Me, right? So pretty much the personality traits our children have at young ages will kind of just continue to grow and manifest. And that's kind of how they'll be as adults to a degree, right? But you got to keep it balanced. So someone with low EQ, they may be impulsive, a poor listener, easily distracted, selfish. I know selfish people, that's one thing that tears me up. I do not like a selfish person. I do not like a selfish person, right? Or somebody with that characteristic, right? So especially somebody selfish that's not trying to grow beyond the selfishness or won't acknowledge their selfishness. That really just ticks me, right? But it's all right because that's their life, not mine. Someone with a high EQ is more so having a spirit of discernment. They're more attentive, focused, and sociable. Someone with a low EQ is more passive, slowful, stubborn, and resistant to change. You guys know anybody resistant to change? Some people, once again, are fearful and resistant to change. Just don't let that person be you, okay? Someone with a higher EQ, they're stable, consistent, and they're more of a good listener. They're also a bit more patient. You got that? They're a bit more patient. Someone with a low EQ, they're more critical and picky and fussy, and they want to be a perfectionist. Now, guess what? Perfectionism or striving for it will drive you insane, okay? And I know for, sometime in my life, I tried to make sure this had to be lined up perfect and that had to be this way. And I remember I used to get so upset with my husband because my mom was very anal about making sure the towels and everything were folded. But guess what? I kind of became my mom in some ways. So I like my linen closet to have all the towels folded a certain way. So my husband would do the laundry sometimes. He would fold up the towels, put them in the linen closet, but they were like this, like everywhere. So that would drive me insane when I would open it up and they're like, eh. So I said, you know what? Instead of fussing and complaining about it, just be thankful that he actually did it, folded it up, carried it upstairs, and put it in the closet. So although I would stand there, take everything back out, fold it up how I like it, and put it back in there, I like it that way because it just fits better. And it looks like a little showroom. So I like that part better. But I said, I cannot, stress myself out and have a heart attack over it because it's just towels. Like, it's not that big of a deal. So now somebody with a higher EQ, they're more detailed, meticulous, they're more systematic, and they're more neat, which is still always cool and always nice, right? So I'm going to give you guys in closing some other tips for virtual schooling that can, also really truly make a great impact for you guys. So a calendar is priceless. Whether you have it on a whiteboard, if you drew it on a regular white piece of paper or whatever, get $1, go to the dollar store, you can get a big wall calendar or a smaller calendar, but use a calendar. Try to get your kids set up if you can in a home with a desk, if there's space or if you can afford it. If not, just make sure try to put them in a nice clean area that's not cluttered. Allow them to decorate their little area how they see fit, right? Even if that area has to transition to something else, maybe you can get one of those big fold up, I forgot what it's called, but like those trifold dividers that the kids use. I find it at the dollar store and when I go to West Orange at the Dollar Tree. Maybe when they're doing their homework at the kitchen table, you can have one up for one kid, one up for the other kid, and let them decorate the walls of it however they want, because we have to make it easier for them to learn. Make sure there's good lighting, okay? Good lighting is important. And like I said, time management is critical. So you have to establish a routine, guys. Establish a routine. That is so important. Try to wake up at a certain time, right? Try to do everything, brush your teeth, have a whole schedule mapped out. Encourage your children to be independent thinkers. Too many times we try to think for our children. And then we wonder when we're not there, why did they do what they did? Maybe because they're kids, number one. And maybe because we haven't really taught them how to be independent thinkers, because one day we won't be there and they're going to have to learn how to cook for themselves and clean and organize and pack their book bag and do all different things. But we have to make sure that they're okay. So we need to teach them ahead of time. And also, wherever your children do their work, we have to limit noise. We have to totally try to do our best to limit the noise because they can get you distracted so easy. No matter if they're in pre-K or if they're in high school, distraction is real and it can be tough. So we just need to make sure that we try to limit distractions. Once again, set boundaries and know that there's no one size fits all approach. Just because this approach worked for your 7-year-old doesn't mean that same approach is going to work for your 8-year-old Or you might have twins. Just because it works for one 7-year-old doesn't mean the other 7-year-old will do it the same way or get it. Everybody is different, right? Everybody is different. They're their own little individuals. So one size fits all approach doesn't work. So you have to try to find out what works for your child and the best way to communicate with your child, right? We also have to make sure that we make their learning environment happy, right? A happy learning environment. Walk past your kids sometimes and just say, hey, I love you, and keep going. You know, if your kids are in another room doing their virtual learning and you're in a different room, just yell to them, hey, love you. Because sometimes that one little gesture can really change that whole kid's day. You might have said it right in the moment where they're sitting there and maybe afraid or nervous because they don't know the answer. But just hearing that positive affirmation from mom, you know, or abuelo or abuela, you know, a caregiver, whomever, to just say big brother, sister, just say, I love you, can change that kid's life in that moment. You can also create a family chore chart, right? Get input from your children, sit down, write a family chore chart to help them really just navigate and get through it. And also know that you have to find out what interests your kid, what are interests that they have. And then you have to explore that. And I guarantee you, whatever interest your kid has, I guarantee you the Newark Museum has something to spark their interest. So make sure you guys stay glued to the website and find really cool stuff. Also, constructive criticism. Constructive criticism is really key. And to know that it's okay to ask for help. If you need help, mom and dad, it's okay to ask for help. Asking for help is actually a sign of strength, not a sign of weakness. But many times our kids get mixed up, and sometimes we get mixed up and think that asking for help is a bad thing. But we have to know that it's okay. And also take a moment to breathe. Shh, I'm sorry, guys. And make sure you guys stay glued to YouTube. Google and YouTube. If there's something that you don't understand, make sure you go to YouTube and Google and have your children be part of it with you, right? So that they can learn and grow right along with you. Because I'm sorry, let me put it on mute. I'm so sorry, guys. So sorry. Dog owner, Doggy Adventures. That's Grizzly. So like I said, use Google and YouTube as your resource. They have the answers for everything. And lastly, I want to let you guys know about earthing, okay? Earthing can make such a huge difference. Now, briefly to explain, the earth is negatively charged, okay? So you have lightning and things of that nature that make the earth negatively charged. Our bodies are positively charged, right? That's just how it works. Our bodies are positively charged, full of electricity, okay? So when we go outside, just barefoot, okay? I'm not saying like walk down Broad Street barefoot. I'm not suggesting that, right? But maybe you can go to the beach or maybe a certain area in the park, barefoot. That actually helps your body to connect. And barefoot will actually, your feet are the most conductive parts of your body. So I like to earth in the sand, you know, in particular, because what happens is it reduces the free radicals in your body. Now, the free radicals that get in your body come from, they can cause inflammation and cancer, diabetes, and all sorts of sicknesses. So we want to eliminate that from our body, because if we're not healthy, how can we be there to be healthy for our children? So we need to make sure that if you earth about 20 to 30 minutes a day, it's just a possibility or a suggestion. You can try it 20 to 30 minutes a day, a couple days a week. You'll start to notice the difference, right? You'll start to notice the difference. You'll be able to sleep better. You'll be able, your blood pressure will be reduced. You'll have less headaches, less muscle tension. Okay. It will reduce chronic pain and chronic fatigue. So connect with the earth. Okay. Have your children connect with the earth. Do activities with your children together so that you guys can connect spiritually and emotionally. Okay. And then things will definitely get better. And don't be afraid of, like I said, Google and YouTube and asking friends and posting on social media for help. Help as a sign of strength, not a sign of weakness. And through it all, make sure that you guys have fun. Have fun during this process. Do everything with love and trust the process. Do everything with love and just simply trust the process. It's a beautiful journey we're all going on right now, guys. It might not seem like it, but it is a beautiful journey. It's a beautiful journey. And for us to have children and to be able to have this conversation, we are truly blessed for this, to even be able to raise up a child or be a guardian or a caregiver or an auntie raising a child or an uncle raising a child. That's a beautiful thing. So we have to remember that to whom much is given, much is required. So I hope these words really helped you guys today, and I hope you had a great time, and I hope to see you guys at some point soon. You can feel free to take a look at my website, jaxlake.com, or follow me on social media at Skills for the Soul, and we can chit chat some more. Or even if you need a life coaching session, I'm a life strategist and I do life coaching. So feel free to reach out and I'd love to work with you. Don't be afraid to see a therapist, a life coach, or a counselor to help you get through this journey, and just know that you're not alone. You have so many people that love and support you and are there for you in any way, but just don't be afraid to reach your hand out and say, hey, I need some help. Don't be afraid to tell your kids, hey, mommy needs a break for a minute, okay? Don't be afraid. And don't be upset if your children say, hey, mom, I need a break for a minute. Because sometimes kids just
we
need
have
to
a question for you.
Yes, wonderful.
We have a question from Darlene. I'm a 72-year-old Gigi, virtual learning with a 5-year-old. How do you deal with the 5-year-old with a nervous condition? For example, picking their finger, twisting their hair while learning.
Gotcha. You know what, Darlene, Miss Darlene, you could possibly even create a little chart. Have the 5-year-old just get a little piece of paper and create a little chart and say, okay, for every class that you do, that you are able to self-regulate a little bit better, we'll put a sticker on the chart. And if you don't have a sticker, you can draw a star or whatever little circle or whatever shape or the initial of that child's name, put that in the little box, right? And so maybe by the end of the week, if that child has X amount of stars or stickers, whatever, that child maybe can get a small reward. Or maybe they can stay up an extra half an hour to watch a show with Gigi. So I know it's challenging and trouble sometimes doing that with the 5-year-old, but just be patient and just know that it's not that child's fault that they're, fidgety, but just try to find other techniques that you can engage with that child to help them to become excited to learn. And sometimes you can even play the quiet game sometimes to try to teach them to, just try to regulate, self-regulate, calm down, and breathing strategies. Inhale, tell your child to breathe. Inhale 5 seconds, outside, exhale for 5 seconds, because we take about 25,000 breaths per day. So we need to breathe in through our nose and let it out through our mouth. And that should help to regulate and calm the child down. And speak to the pediatrician as well if you have any other concerns. Any other questions?
That was the only question that we had.
Okay.
But I have a question for you, Jackie.
Yes.
So how do you keep young people focused when they're on the computer all day and they just don't want to be there anymore?
Yeah, the same concept, and just, sometimes they just need to not have so much screen time. So when they're off of the computer at the end of the day from school, sometimes you just have to have them go the other direction, away from their computer, not playing games, not playing Roblox and Minecraft and, all that other stuff that they like to play, because now they're inundated with so much screen time, right? And they'll get total digital fatigue. So now schoolwork seems more troublesome to them, because they not only did their schoolwork all day on the computer, but now they also spent 4 hours doing what they thought was fun, or even an hour, still looking at a screen. And eventually it will affect their eyes, it affects their brain. There's, some really good books that you can, read about that. There's one book in particular called Glow Kids, GLOW Kids. And it talks about how too much screen time really impacts the neurotransmitters in the children's brains. And how when a lot of those games are created, they have people hooked up with electrodes to their brain. And if certain parts of their brain don't light up, the developer says, whoa, this is not the right game because this addiction sensor is not lighting up. So those games are designed to get our children addicted, which can then in the future lead to other, addictions as well, aside from addictions that we definitely don't want, our children to be struggling with. So we just have to try to find ways to engage with them and have conversation. When the kids have a break from class, many times they have a half an hour for lunch, or half an hour if they don't have a special study group. You can just have the kid, do some exercises or just try to have conversation with them, and let them know that it's going to be okay. Sometimes they just need reassurance that it's going to be okay. And I'm tired too. So I understand.
That's wonderful. And that's a wonderful transition over to our museum educator, Mary,
Yes.
who's going to show us now how to have engaging activities away from the computer.
Yes, activities that don't require you to be on screen or looking at the screen itself. So hello, everybody. My name is Mary. I'm the senior museum educator here at the Newark Museum of Art. I specialize in sciences, and today we are going to be making some moon phases, and we are going to be using Oreo cookies to create them. So this is a way of using food for educational purposes, but also an activity that you get to do with your kids that allows that sort of family interaction as well. Now, one thing I want to say is that you don't just have to do it with Oreo cookies. I came up with some other options that are a little bit healthier too, that I'll show you after the activity is done, to give you more of an idea of different materials you can use to do this with food with your kids. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change to my other camera here so you can see a top-down view of what I'm going to be working on. There we go. So we are going to be going through the different moon phases that we see as the moon orbits around the Earth. So our moon phases start with our new moon. We go to our waxing crescent. After that, we get to our first quarter. We go to our waxing gibbous, to our full moon, to our waning gibbous, to our third quarter, and then to our waning crescent. So what we are going to do is we're going to go and we are going to create models of these moon phases using Oreo cookies. So we're going to start with our new moon phase, and we are going to take one of our cookies and we are going to twist the top. And if all of the frosting does not come off onto one side, you can use a spoon to scrape it off and then put it onto the side where the majority of the frosting is. The new moon phase is probably the easiest phase to do because all you need is the side of the cookie that doesn't have the frosting on it. So there is our new moon phase. When we see, well, we don't see a new moon. When we show the new moon phase, this is the side of the moon that's not being lit up by the sun. So the other side that's facing away from us, that is facing towards the sun, is lit up. All we see with the new moon phase is the side of the moon that is in shadow. So this is going to be our new moon phase with our cookie. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set these aside as we go. And I'm going to make a nice little plate here for our different phases as we go. So there's our new moon phase. So now what we're going to do is we are going to take another cookie and we're going to make a waxing crescent. Again, the dark area here is all the shadow of the moon, all the stuff that's in shadow that's not being lit up by the sun. The part you see in white is the edge of the moon that we can see that's being lit up by the sun. So what I'm going to do is take a second cookie and twist. And again, if not all of the frosting comes off on one side, you can scrape it to put it on the other. What I'm going to do is take a spoon and I'm going to carve out the frosting that I don't need. So I want what my cookie to look like. I want it to match the pattern that we have here. So what I'm going to do is take the curved edge of my spoon and I'm going to start tracing around so that I make a separation between the two, and I'm going to remove the part of the frosting that I don't need. So just scraping that away. And I'm going to put that on my other plate. So you want, turn it around here, that's the right way. You want your Oreo cookie to look something like this, where you see that you do have a portion that is your shadow here, and you have the portion that is lit up by the sun. So there's your waxing crescent phase. So I'm going to put that, I'm going to put that up here. To go from our waxing crescent, our next phase is our first quarter. So again, we're going to take one more cookie And we are going to twist it as we did before and open it up. I'm going to let you in on a little secret. I twisted these all before I was doing this activity. That's why you're not seeing any separating onto the other half of the cookie. So I'm doing a little bit of a cheat. But again, if it does end up on that one side, scrape it off, put it on the other so that you have a nice space to work with here. You might notice with our first quarter, half of our moon is in shadow. And notice the shadow is on the left-hand side. And half of our moon is lit up by the sun from what we can see, and that's on the right-hand side. So to do this, instead of using the curved part of my spoon, I'm going to turn my spoon around and use the handle because that's a straight edge. So I'm going to go right down the middle of my cookie, and I'm going to scrape half of it off. Simple, straightforward, to the point. I'm going to put that frosting on my plate over here and place my first quarter moon right down there on my plate. So what we're seeing is we're going from our new moon to our waxing crescent to our first quarter. We're seeing more and more of the moon's side that faces us being lit up by the sun. So let's continue on. Let's go to our waxing gibbous phase. Now, gibbous is a word that when we talk about moon phases, a lot of people tend to forget because it's not as well talked about. Basically, a gibbous phase is where it's more than half, but it's not quite a full moon yet. So it's about halfway in between a full moon and halfway in between our half moon or our first quarter. That's where we get our gibbous phase. And waxing basically means we're increasing in the amount of light that we can see illuminating the face of the moon. So let's take yet another cookie. We're going to twist and we're going to separate. And for our waxing gibbous, notice we only have a little bit of shadow now on the right-hand side, or sorry, on the left-hand side, and most of the light is on the right-hand side. So I'm only going to take away a little bit. I'm going to use my spoon and take away a little bit of the cream on the inside here, just like so. And there we have, oh, turn it around here so it matches. There we go. There we have our waxing gibbous. So we're going to place that one down here. Now, you remember how we took that first cookie. We took our new moon phase, we put it down there. That was part of this cookie here. We didn't do anything with this other part because when you separate your first cookie and you have your new moon phase, the other half of it is going to be your full moon phase. So we don't have to do anything for our full moon. And this is when we see the entire side of the moon lit up by the sun that faces the earth. So we're halfway done with our lunar phases. So we're going to continue on to our waning phases. Remember, waxing is where we're seeing an increase in the amount of the moon's surface that you can see from Earth being lit up by the sun. Waning means that we are going to see a decrease. So going from a full moon all the way back to a new moon, we're going to see the shadow begin to increase and the lit side is going to start decreasing. So with our waning gibbous, we're going to take yet another cookie. Twist the top, set aside the empty part, and we're going to carve it the same way we did this waxing gibbous. We're just going to take a little bit of that frosting off of one side, like so, but we're not going to place it down the same way that we did for our waxing one. We're going to turn it around so that the shadow now is going to be on the right-hand side. So with our waxing phases, our shadow is on the left-hand side. With our waning phases, the shadow is going to be on the right-hand side. So that's one way to tell waxing from waning. So now we are to our third quarter. We're going to make it the same way we did our first quarter moon. We're going to take our cookie, we're going to twist, bring it off. Instead of using the curved edge of the spoon, we're going to turn that back around again. Get that flat edge with the handle. We're going to split it right down the middle and we're going to scrape just like that. But again, we want to make sure that we're not putting it down exactly the same way as that first quarter, because our shadow has to be on the other side. So the shadow has to be on the right-hand side for our third quarter, and the lit side is on the left. So you'll see how this pattern is going from dark to, we see it lit on the right-hand side for our waxing phases until it gets all the way to our full moon. And then on the left-hand side, it's lit, and the right-hand side has our shadow. So here we're seeing a decrease in the amount of light that is hitting the moon. And so the last phase that we have here is our waning crescent. So one final cookie here. Again, we're going to go ahead and twist and open. So our waning crescent, we're going to make kind of the same way we did our waxing crescent. We're going to go ahead and take our spoon. We're going to make what looks like kind of a little smiley face in the frosting, but we're going to scrape away everything that's supposed to be in shadow. So we have that little smiley face right there, but we want to make sure that we don't put it the same way as the first one. We have to turn it around so the shadow is on the right-hand side, and then we put it in place. So here we have a completed group of Oreo moon cookies. So this is a very easy activity to do with your kids. You can have fun talking about patterns, talking about shapes. You can even go into fractions. How much of the frosting did we have to take away? Did we take away half? Did we take away 3/4? Did we take away 1/4? A third? 2/3? How much did we take away? How can we make a prediction? What should come next is another good question to be asking with this. So this is a really simple activity to do with your family, but if you don't want your kids to be eating all of this sugar without any sort of additional nutrition added into it, I'm going to shift this to the side. There are two other things you can do to make it a little bit of a healthier activity. Oh, I hope my camera didn't freeze here. I might have to change my video back here. Let me change my video back to me, and then let me go back to my camera too, because it's an old camera. There we go. There's another thing you can do. You can take a banana and you can slice the banana into fairly thick pieces and then carve the moon phases out of the pieces of banana and then put that on top of a piece of toast or bread to where you've applied peanut butter. So this would be a healthier option, but you can still focus on learning the moon phases as you go. So we go from our crescent moon to our half, to our gibbous, to our full, to our waning gibbous, our third quarter, and our crescent back here. Or if your kids like nut butter and jelly, you can make these yummy, yummy treats. Oh, my camera's a little bit bright there. So I have peanut butter and jelly on tortillas. So I took a little cup to cut little circles for tortillas, and I put peanut butter on one side to show the sunshine and jelly on the other to show the shadow. So there are different ways to teach this, but also to have fun doing it with food as well. Okay, someone will take the Oreos, but she knows that she needs the banana. Okay. Well, the nice thing is that you can have all of it. Just make sure you do it in moderation, because it's okay to have a little bit of sweet once in a while. It's just some options might be a little more healthy. So it's okay to do kind of maybe the not so healthy option once in a great while as well. But this gives you an idea of some of the nice things you can do with your kids that don't require them to be in front of a screen, that can be more of a family activity. And also you can bring in some health issues with that too. You can talk about, well, we have to use this because it's a healthier option. The bananas give us potassium, which is good for us. The peanut butter or other nut butters have good oils for us as opposed to the cookies themselves. But also, I have some friends who are allergic to, that are allergic to chocolate. So vanilla cookies will work with this. Lemon cookies will work with this. If you want to take, maybe using something like a pancake, and maybe you making mini pancakes and then putting different types of jam on them to do your moon phases that way too. There's so many different ways you can work with these patterns and this progression of the moon phases with your food to make it more of a learning experience for your kids. Now, one last thing I want to say is that all these cookies that don't have the what's it called, frosting on them anymore, say your kids eat all the moon phase ones, but they don't want to eat these you can crush up, you can add into a milkshake, you can put on top of ice cream. One thing I thought of today is that if you have a couple of these, take a scoop of ice cream, put it on one, sandwich it, put it in the freezer. Then you have a small, nice little ice cream sandwich for yourself or for your kids later on, and you don't have to throw anything away. So there's plenty of ways to use the stuff that you may not have, or that will be left over after you do this activity. All right, the last thing I want to do is, I don't think I can share my screen. No, I cannot share my screen. So I will tell you about an upcoming community day that we have at the museum. We are going to be doing virtually. It is called Astrofest. So if you are interested in space, science, and astronomy, we have a great community day coming up next month. Join us for Astrofest on Saturday, November 21st from 10 a.m. in the morning until 5 p.m. in the afternoon. We're going to have a fun-filled event that explores space and astronomy. And during this day of cosmic adventure, you can enjoy a story and activity about the moon. You can meet a real astronaut and ask questions if you want. You can take a tour of a space shuttle at the Intrepid Sea, Air, and Space Museum virtually with us. You can build a model of the solar system and then rock out to the spacey music of the chromatics. And so again, that's Astrofest on Saturday, November 21st from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. So there'll be more information on our website on how to register for the different sessions, the same way you registered for this Zoom session, because you will need to either access it via Zoom or via Facebook. So we hope that you enjoy that and join us for that event as well. But that's going to end my part of the presentation. So Shirley and Sarah, do you want to come back on?
Yes, we actually have one more question for Jackie
Okay, perfect. Go ahead.
in the chat. Jackie, can you come back on?
Yes, I can.
The question is, how do you get children to be still and listen to what is being taught?
I mean, that can always be tricky. As I prefaced before, you can always do the chart, but that's still kind of like long-termish. It takes a while, it takes practice. But especially if the child has some sort of condition, the teachers, I'm sure, are aware that the child does have a condition. So on our end, we just have to make sure that we're patient and try to, even times where they're not in class, just try to keep them focused and keep them on task doing other things. So aside from them being on screen, when they're not in class, you could possibly say, okay, help, let's wash the dishes, or let's find some other fun activity, or let's do the Oreo or the banana activity, right? So if they have an issue with fidgeting, have them do other things that are constructive, right? You can have them paint, you can have them color, maybe in their downtime, to just try to keep them calm. Once again, those breathing exercises, right? And have them just try to reflect and just try to talk to you. And it can be exhausting. It can definitely be exhausting. But the more we freak out as adults and show our frustration, the more it makes the children want to kind of freak out and go into a little zone, into a little bubble, into a shell. And it makes it just that much more challenging for them to learn. So we just have to try to respect the children, understand do our best to understand what they're going through and have some empathy, but still continue to be supportive with them as well. So any little gadgets you can get for them, things that are free or that they can create, just try to keep them engaged that way. And also watch their diet, because certain foods and drinks, you don't want to give them a lot of sugary drinks. Focus on, water, just a little bit of 100% juice, but definitely not the bodega style junk food. Sometimes that parents tend to, give their children because it's quick and easy, but it's full of carbs and sugar and things that can also cause their system some imbalance and it doesn't allow them to focus the way they need. So they need a healthy, well-balanced breakfast to start the day, number one.
Wonderful.
I hope that answered your question.
That did. Thank you so much, Jackie, for coming on. It was very helpful and useful for me. I'm borrowing one of your quotes. Speak without offending and listen without defending. I love that. That's going to be on my Facebook page tomorrow. But thank you so much for coming out. I just want to tell everyone else, please visit the Newark Museum of Art website. We have a ton of programs for you and your children. We do have another community day that's coming up on November the 1st. It's the Day of the Dead program. Please check our website for that, as well as our family programs that we offer every weekend, our creative play, our science and art programs that we offer on the weekends. Visit our website to see all of our offerings, and these programs are free. That's the key word. All of our programs are free. Thank you so much for joining us, and look for us out there virtually on Facebook. And when we're back at the museum, look for us live. Thank you again for coming.
Thank you. Good night, guys.
Good night. Thanks, Jax.